Well, it's good to start with intros, of course. So, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, Kelly, and kind of your role at A State, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So I am the Director of Learning Support Services and the coordinator for the first year experience at Arkansas State University.
Nice, great. Which takes up more of your time, directing the learning support services, or FYE?
It really maybe depends on the day, but
Okay.
in the fall, they both really compete with each other for who takes up more time. And in the spring, I would say it's learning support because all of our making connections or first year experience
Yeah.
courses really happen in fall.
Yeah, totally. In learning support services at A State, I mean, there's the LSS, which is, I think, the biggest
Mhm.
peer tutoring program on campus.
Yep.
Um, and then there's also many other centers at A State that you help. You don't lead those centers individually, but you have played a big role in trying to bring everyone into onto one page and kind of like working together. So, will you talk about that a little bit as well? How does that look?
Yeah, so we are sort of disaggregated across campus. We've got 8 tutoring centers, but like you said, we do try and work together. We created this sort of informal cohort or committee of directors across campus who we try and touch base with on a monthly basis
Hmm.
to report cumulatively to let them know how they're doing. If they're not tracking their own numbers, we're still tracking them for them. And to sort of give them the big picture of what's happening across campus in learning support. A big piece of that was like pulling everybody onto the same page with Penji. We only have one center, athletics, that doesn't use Penji. So that's been a really, I know, we've really enjoyed though having the single platform that most of us are
Yeah.
participating in, but it's just really offering even um, not career advancement, but like professional development opportunities for folks across
Hmm.
campus who aren't involved or who weren't previously involved in CRLA, the College Reading and Learning
Interesting. Yeah.
Association, learning more about our accreditation process, our training process, so that when we're doing something new, we're, really just offering that opportunity up to any director who wants to participate.
Great. That's what I was going to ask when you started kind of answering it. Is that is hard for some schools to do? Is to get everybody to work together on this and not be in their silos. And you've done a good job of that. And so I was going to ask you how that has come about in terms of like what's the recommended approach to like what are the incentives for people to really get like work together and all of that and what's worked
Yeah.
for you. So the first thing you mentioned there was professional development, which is interesting. So and kind of like educating them or keeping them in the loop a couple things. But yeah, just speak a little more on that. If like you were starting again from scratch, like how would you try to get this kind of collaboration going?
Sure. So I think that making sure that you know who all the players are,
Yeah.
going to their space, learning about their space, being interested in their space and invested in their success, and really posing yourself not as a competitor, but as a teammate.
Yeah.
And really, anytime you have resources that are shareable, to share them.
Hmm.
That's been one of our biggest things because I think it could be easy for us to be the biggest tutoring center on campus and to say, actually, like, it's like you don't need to exist because we're here. I
Yeah.
think that it would be really easy for us to make like a power play. But
Right.
instead, we
And
say
that's what
like, hey, we've got these resources. Can we supplement what you're doing? Is there something that you need or that you want to do that you can't do because you don't have the budget? What is that thing and how can we work together on that? And even just like I'm wearing it right now. Let me show you. This
oh
are
that's wow.
our tutoring sweaters this
Those
last
are
year.
pretty sweet. Wow.
We live in the
You-
library, so that's what's on there.
That's
But
nice.
buying shirts for everyone across campus instead of just buying them for our staff, like that's silly,
No, I hear you.
but
Yeah.
they love it. So
Yeah. You value them. You want to be their partner. You want to help, not like compete, as you said.
yeah, and
Cool.
so we've shared money, we've shared time, we've shared graduate assistance. So at any point, if someone says I really need, and we try and make that happen.
Nice, nice.
Mhm.
Has did this effort to streamline and centralize and collaborate come from, the powers that be, and people were telling you, Kelly, could you help with this, or is this more like, hey, we think we should do this on campus, and you kind of just said, let's push this way, or how did this come about?
Yeah. So when I started in learning support, I started in 2018. And really, right at the same time, there were two or three other directors who were also new to their programs. And so it was kind of a really nice time to say, okay, we're all new, like, let's work together. That's not what the old guard did, but let's be sort of like change makers in that. And I think it was really a desire, especially with Tab and myself, Tab running the writing center. I
Yeah.
think it was a big piece of what we felt like we were missing in our jobs because we each run learning centers, but we're in different departments. We don't have a true peer in
Mm,
our own space, like
sure.
in our own departments. And so we had to go out and find our peers. And then it just felt more natural to do things together
To work
than to
together.
try and, like if all eight of our centers had a study day event, that's silly.
Crazy. Yeah, there's some redundant things that you can,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like
So it
efficiency.
just felt natural.
Nice.
Mhm.
Um, Great. Well, that sounds good. So, one of the big topics that I wanted to dig into, like it's kind of the big topic that's pretty hard for learning centers and colleges, um, using tutoring to like actually impact student success and actually impact like persistence and retention. That's kind of the big question, the big challenge, and it's hard to do it in a black and white way. And I think it's interesting because in our conversations, you've done a good job on engagement and kind of figuring out how to get the right students or at-risk students to engage, and you've got some thoughts there, and then also on assessment and how to sort of paint the picture and try to tease out what's actually happening statistically and whatever. And so just in general, and I'll just kind of let you break it down from a high level, but I have some questions. Making your efforts actually make a difference for students that might otherwise fail a class or drop out of college, like how do you think about that question, and like where does your mind go right away with that?
Oh man.
I know that's like the hardest question, but yeah,
That's so big. That feels like a loaded question.
I can
Um,
give you leading things to start on if you want, but
yeah, I mean, we just want I mean, you don't want to waste your time, right? And a lot of our efforts, like we're here to make B students A students, but really we're here, that's a lot of like where our effort goes. But we really
yeah,
want to make sure that that student who is on the cusp of leaving to stay because
yeah,
they feel supported. Um, we get referrals from Transition Studies, our conditionally admitted program. We get referrals from Access and Accommodations, like normally called Disability Services on some campuses. So we're touching really high risk student populations as far as retention goes. And I think as a co-curricular program, it is difficult to measure assessment or to measure like success.
yeah,
Um, but for us, it's been really important that our administrators know why we're here,
yeah,
and that we can truly track the difference that we're making for our students. So we want to make sure that like we're offering value, and if we're not, that we can pivot. So that's been kind of the intention behind our focus on assessment.
yeah,
So if there's like a
yeah,
particular piece you want to
yeah,
dig
there
into
is, there is, there is, there is.
first. Okay.
So that all makes sense. So just to get to like the basics down of how the system works. You have, I'm sure you do some general marketing to students. Hey, the LSS is here for you, and you should come use us. And some students do, some students don't. You have referrals from particular offices, and that is identifying a more high risk student population. Those come to you, and I think I like your approach to how you've reached out and engaged those students. I think that's one thing we'll dig into, but so you kind of reach out to specific students in that way. Are there other flags or other data that you use to identify other high risk student populations to try and engage other than referrals from other offices?
Yeah, so you talked about flags, and so we literally call them flags in our um, retention management software, pack support, or
Yep.
Starfish,
Our fish.
whatever you're using on campus, though. But we've worked with that office to make sure that students who aren't going to class, who are receiving or earning low test scores or quiz grades or missing assignments, that sort of thing, all of those flags physically come to us in email every single week. And so we're reaching out specifically to those students to say, like, hey, we saw that this is going on. Do you need academic support? These are the interventions that we offer.
Yeah.
We've talked before, but we always end with a question so that the students
Yes.
feel like they have to reply. They like something is prompting them. We're not just giving them a laundry list of things that we're doing or offering, but we're um, telling them or like leading them or prompting them to engage with us. We've said a lot of our students, they might reply back and they're like, no, I don't need anything. And, that's great. We know at least
Great.
they saw it and, it was
Yeah.
in front of them. But then we have a lot of students too who reach out. The last time we looked at that data, it was about 25% um, of students who we reach out to actually receive an
It's really
academic
good.
intervention on campus. So, yeah, so that's really awesome for us to be able to then, um,
Ooh, quick question there.
yeah,
25% receive some academic intervention on campus.
yep.
So those are high risk students. It's 1 out of 4. That's really good.
Mhm.
Would you have a sense of what percent like reply to those emails? I'm sure it's not 25%,
It's
but
not 25%. Yeah.
yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
No, I mean, I couldn't tell you like if I
Yeah.
it would just be me pulling out like
A
a
number.
solid 10%.
Yeah, but
But
it could be something like that, like 1 out of 10, maybe. Maybe it's
yeah,
1 out of 15, but like
yeah,
just so other folks have a sense of like what to expect and not be
yeah.
like, oh, no one's replying. Like even if it's 1 out of 10 or even less, like it's still probably pretty great, you know?
Oh no, yeah, we
Yeah,
love that. And I mean, and I would say actually it's probably more than 10%, but half of them are actually receiving an academic intervention, and half of them are saying like, actually, no, thank you, I don't
I'm
need
good.
you.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's
yeah.
right.
So, but all of our outreach from that perspective, from the retention management tool, we utilize a graduate assistant to do all of
Great.
that and to actually reach out. So it's not generated. It's not like automatic when a flag is raised, because we really want to be intentional too and not spamming our students. And so a student who is struggling might end up with 10 or 15 flags,
Yeah.
depending on who their faculty is. And we don't want to send them 10 or 15 emails. So
Yeah, right.
we do like to be careful in that way. And so it is a little time consuming to do, but we feel like it's worth the effort.
Yeah, great. So the measurement that you track and probably report to other folks is, hey, we reached out to these 1,000 students, and 250 of them have used an academic intervention. Might not have been directly that first email or whatever, but we might have reached out a couple times, and they see it. Maybe they don't reply, but then they now are aware, and so there's a decent enough connection to that where that like that's kind of the metric that makes the most sense to look at in your view in terms of is the outreach working? Is that kind of the thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is it worth our time to do?
Yeah. Should we keep doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have templates, and do they are they different at different times in the term? How if someone else wanted to have a grad assistant? Okay, here's your playbook. Like how would you recommend it?
Yeah. So it usually depends on, we always say like why their flag was raised. So we're like,
Yeah.
hey, we saw in pack support that X faculty member raised a flag for whatever the flag was raised for. And we just wanted to let you know that these are some academic supports that you could participate in on campus. This is how you do that. And then we leave it off with, is there anything else we can help with? Can we help plug you
Hmm.
into any of these? We kind of leave it up to the graduate assistant who is working on that. But we always
Great.
end with a question. So that's our biggest piece. And
Nice.
then after a student has been on our report a couple of times, then we'll actually call them. So we'll have them call from our offices to just physically touch base if we haven't heard from them via
Yeah.
email. So we're tracking students that way.
Cool. You'll call them.
Hmm.
And are the calls pretty effective?
No, they
No.
they don't. Most of them don't answer, right? So
Right.
our goal is to like leave a voicemail most of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of our students don't answer. We get a lot of calls back, but we don't get a
You
lot
do?
of answers. Yeah, on our
Okay.
first call. So again, some of them, half of our calls are like, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know I don't need anything," but like,
Right.
okay, well, thanks for calling us back.
No, that's good.
Yeah, but half of our calls are like, oh yeah, actually I do need to get plugged in. And one thing I want to make a note about too is that when we're tracking students who are receiving support from an academic intervention, we are looking at that cumulative data. So even if we're making the outreach from learning support, if they went to the writing center for help, if they went to the communication
For
center,
sure.
math center, like we're counting
It's a
that.
team effort.
Exactly, in that team effort. And so that's another piece too, like for our cohort, that we're like sort of offering this service, like we're doing this thing, we're making this effort,
Yeah.
that may benefit their center also,
Yeah.
but definitely benefits our students.
Cool. So you reach out and then you track who gets an intervention of some kind. And then, so that's kind of step one is, are we getting the students that might need help into one of the offices, right?
Mhm.
And I think leadership assume this is useful and good anyways. And everybody has seen some research over the years and intuitively it makes sense.
Mhm.
So that's good. But then I know you've taken it steps further to say, like, how is interacting impacting their grades or their chance to persist? So how have you approached that? It's obviously very much an art in this case. It's like hard to tease it all out, but
Yeah.
how have you approached attributing like engagement with success?
Hmm. So a couple of ways. We've used a Cengage program before where I think you have to have 1,000 or more data points, but cumulatively, we've been able to compare apples to apples, and they do that with some math that happens in a
Okay.
program.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
like
Some magic. Nice.
magic, mystical. It comes back to us though, and it gives us a percentage of how much our students are persisting over students who are not participating in an academic intervention.
Yeah.
And so we
Right.
were able to like give hard data for that, but that's an expensive program, and isn't maybe feasible for all
Yeah.
campuses. But we've also been focused, in the last 2 years. When I say we, I'm talking about Tabitha, for the writing center, and
Yeah.
myself are focused on a qualitative assessment that we've been working through, and we've been utilizing Pinji to do that, which has been really great because all of our assessment pieces are embedded within Penji. Students are leaving notes. They like take our little survey after their
Mhm.
sessions. Our tutors are doing the same, leaving their note taking prompts and all of that. But we've really structured that in a way that it focuses on a quality or qualitative assessment, um, over just like numbers, like bodies in the door.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that has been really awesome to see, and that, we're also using that data kind of twofold to both justify and show that there is quality and, in the service that's being provided, and that students are walking away, having truly learned. And we're also able though to take some of that data that's provided from our tutors and to reframe some of what's happening in our tutor training program so that their efforts can be even more effective
Hmm.
from one semester to the next. So that's been really awesome. But our qualitative assessment has looked at, whether or not creating a goal and communicating that goal effectively with a tutor and tutee in a session helps to, solidify learning.
Yeah.
And what we found so far is that students and tutors who make a goal and set a goal at the beginning of the session, whether their goals are aligned or not, meaning they're like they've expressed them in the exact same way, whether they're aligned or not, just having set those goals leads to a greater sense of self-reported learning so far, as
Huh.
opposed to students and tutors who don't set a goal before a session. So that's been really cool to see, and
Very
we're
cool.
still working with our tutors to refine like what that process looks like for them. Um,
Yeah. And so
but
that would be um, after the session, you ask the tutor, did you set a goal with the two T? And you
mhm.
also, two T's leaving feedback is less frequent, I know. So is it mostly the tutor leaving? Was a goal set together? And then is the two T the one that reports self-reported like learning in the session? Or talk me through how that works.
Yes, so I think that we've got 4 or 5 questions that we ask each, and they mirror each other. So the tutor is asked, what was a goal set in the session? What was the goal? Did you make progress toward the goal? And how do you know that progress was made?
Okay.
And then the student is essentially asked the same question. Did you set a goal with your tutor? What was the goal that you set? Did you make progress toward that goal? And then it goes into confidence in learning, and do you feel
Yeah.
more confident than before you came to the session, and that sort of thing. So we're using confidence as the difference,
The
the
proxy or
variable
whatever.
there. Yeah, but um, but we only are looking at the data that we're calling complete, right? So both the tutor and the student have to fully complete both sets of data in order for us to look at those. But it's been really
Which
cool so
is
far.
that's real. I like it. Yeah, it's experimenting around, and I think it's so hard because you can't go all the way to saying like if a goal was set, did they persist at a higher rate, right? Like
Right.
that's pretty hard, but theoretically, if you get enough data points, you could.
Yeah,
But
exactly. We'd
but
be
like it's
looking at
also
like a
so
4 to 6
disconnected.
year study,
Correct. Yeah, like this is like a huge thing,
Yeah.
but
But I'll also say that when we're looking at persistence data, we're working with institutional research to do that. And when we look at persistence, we look at persistence from one semester to the next.
yeah,
So we're generally not reporting to our administrators like graduation rates, because you might come as a freshman
of
student,
course.
go and like get support
Yeah,
through your sophomore year and then never come see us again, right? Or
sure.
you never come see us until you're a senior, and then you're
Yeah,
here. So for
semester by
us,
semester.
persistence means from one semester to the next.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean graduation.
that makes sense.
So that has been the most effective for us.
Yeah. And I know you've done the correlative kind of if they use the LSS, what's their what percent persisted versus if they didn't,
Hmm.
semester to semester, and
Yeah.
seeing significant differences there. I know.
Hmm.
Is that obviously there's causation, correlation, things like they self-selected into using tutoring, so they're obviously motivated,
Right.
but there's still some credibility in so like how has that been useful on campus in communicating value, leadership values, that metric?
Hmm.
How has that gone?
Yeah, and I think it is it has made a difference in like resource allocation for us,
Yeah,
as far as like administration goes, but we also use that number when we are talking to students in the classroom. So when
yeah,
we are going to our faculty visits, we're going to chairs council, we're going just for like a standard classroom visit, then we're showing students that number to say, listen, like if you come, then you are more likely to be successful.
okay,
So Dr. Sandra Yancey McGuire
uh-huh,
wrote a book called Teach Yourself How to Learn.
yes,
And she's a chemist by trade. She's been
okay,
in higher ed for a long, long time, but she talks to faculty a lot. She has sort of like this book that she wrote. She's got a dual book, one for students and one for faculty. And
yeah,
when she's talking to the faculty, when she's written to them, she's said that you need to like take that first assessment with your students, like after that first test or after that first quiz or whatever that looks like, then you need to go in and you need to show them the data. You need to show them how they're comparing to their peers, and
Yeah.
you need to show them what an academic intervention looks like, and then what that academic intervention might lead to. And if that's like persistence for them, then does that mean they need to go to tutoring before every test? Does that mean they need to study 3 hours? What does that look like for
Yeah.
you? What have you been measuring? And so that's what we've been doing. We've like taken that number and just preemptively shown students like, hey, if you come for 4 more sessions, then you're more likely to pass this class with a C or higher.
Yeah.
And so that I think in itself is like, oh, well, I know what like the medicine is now. Like I've
Yeah.
been given a prescription, and it's up to me to like take that appropriately so that I can be as successful as possible.
It clarifies it for students, and you've seen that make a difference in terms of students wanting to come in and following that advice, I guess, because
Right.
there's data behind it.
Exactly. It's
Nice.
motivating.
Yeah, very much so. Um, when you think about like the college investing in peer tutoring programs and how that's happened in your years there, I think like our goal would be, we believe peer tutoring is very effective. I think we both share that, right? And um, I think the goal would be like leadership continuing to give leadership and give directors and managers like the tools to figure out what to invest deeper in and what to not invest deeper in. So that's on a micro level, like, oh, embedded groups are really driving success, or weekly sessions are better than one-off. So that's kind of like the director level. But then it's also like at the leadership level of, hey, we can actually have confidence that we should keep putting more and more money into the LSS because we know it's working. And I think there's a sense probably from like the provost office kind of level of like not having great confidence in what is actually working and not. And so do you think that's an area where in general like improvement could be made, where if people were armed with stronger, maybe it's like Cengage, but that's more scalable and not expensive, and it's not something that just happens one off, but it's like you have like an ongoing like better understanding. So do you think that's a big opportunity, or I think it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know if it's super solvable, but sure. But what's your reaction to that, like from just the college perspective of
Yeah,
getting
I
better?
think it's kind of similar to like faculty teaching in the classroom, that
Yeah.
most directors or administrators of programs like ours didn't go to school for business, right? Like
Yeah.
I didn't go to school with a business admin degree. I don't have a degree in economics. I don't have a degree in statistics,
Right.
that sort of thing, right? I'm not an accountant. And then they gave me, like
Everything.
$100,000. Yeah, they gave me $100,000, and they were like, use this efficiently. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay. And so I think it's similar to like faculty in the classroom. Like they are so trained in their discipline, but they weren't taught how to be teachers, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that there is a level of business acumen that as a director you have to seek on your own if that's not already being fed to you.
Yeah.
And that has to be a piece of your professional development. And I think that that's just a space that we've tried to work toward. And when I first came in, it was learning what all of those processes look like. What does it mean for me to manage this type of budget? But then to show my administrators that I was trying to be as efficient with those dollars as possible without losing the flexible support that we're able to offer students who really need that, like dynamic academic support that is suited just for them. So
Yeah.
it's like balancing all of that, but reporting those numbers in a way that your administrators really see that you're trying to do that, and that you're justifying all of the financial decisions that your program is making, so that when you do go and ask for money or for a new position or whatever that happens to be, that they've already trusted you. They trust
Yeah.
you because you have, you've shown them that you want what's best both for the students but also for the bottom line, because I think that that is important to our administrators. That's where their brains are. So if you
Yeah.
don't know, how to do that or what that looks like, then you need to work with the folks who do, whether it's in your budget office whether it's like getting a report from Talia so that you can talk more about efficiency,
Yeah.
and making those like making reports for that. No one told me like, hey, we need to know how much how efficient your tutoring is, like per dollar, right?
Yeah.
But I just inherently, okay, well, drop in tutoring for us at least, like some programs it works great. Tab in the writing center, like it's a great use of their time, because they can be working on other projects as graduate assistants, and so the drop-in model still works for them and still makes sense. But there was too much guesswork in it for us, and anyway, it wasn't utilizing our dollars the best
No.
it could have been. So
And so efficiency, I think this is an important
yeah,
point that's hard for people. And as you said, people don't have training in this. So efficiency in this case,
hmm
I think what I heard for you were focusing on dollars per like contact hour, right? Or like
yeah,
tutoring hours per student contact hour.
right,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
So like that would be the report. If anyone's like, "Oh, what does that report even look like?" It's kind of like the simplest metric would just be over this semester,
yeah,
how many student contact hours did we have and how many tutor hours did we pay out? And hey, leadership, this is I'm tracking this now, and maybe you can wait to report it until you've tracked 2 semesters and you gotten better.
yeah,
But then it's like,
exactly.
look, I'm looking at it in this way, and I'm trying to be more efficient, and then that would immediately tell a budget decision maker, like, oh, this person is watching out for the dollars I'm giving them. Like, this is
Right.
good.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. And as we went on, I mean, yeah, we started like on that big, like 50,000 foot view where we were looking at just like all of our tutoring hours and all of the dollars we spent on tutoring. And we just like did some quick math there, right? But then
yeah,
we got down to like line by line, right? Like tutor by tutor, how efficient was each tutor? And then we started breaking that out by service, like one-on-one tutoring versus group tutoring, and all of those pieces. And then once you feel comfortable and confident with that, then you're adding in those like other grade pieces, maybe, or those confidence pieces, right? Adding in another variable there to say, like, okay, well, now we want to really balance quality versus dollars spent too, so that you're
Mhm.
being holistic in how you're approaching your budget as a director.
I love it. That's good. Uh, Confidence pieces being the self-reported student confidence after the sessions.
Right.
Um, right. And so, a couple of quick questions there. As you said, efficiency per tutor. So, would that be like this tutor didn't use all their hours weren't booked? Like, is that something that they can control? I guess in your opinion.
So that would have been when we were still in a drop-in model,
Yeah,
So
this
like,
tutor does chemistry, and they're just not they're getting used all the time. But this one in
yeah,
statistics, nobody's using them. So
right,
it's not maybe the tutor's fault, but it's more like the demand isn't there, and so we might need to adjust the hours we're paying.
right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Nice.
So because I think when we first started out, it was like, oh well, everyone gets 10 hours, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But our teacher education students, they were getting 10 hours to just like hang out.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
nobody was coming
That was the
to
easy
be
win. Yeah,
tutored for like
right,
math for teachers. But yeah, we were like busting down the door for developmental
right.
math. And so, not
Yeah,
everything is fair and equal. So let's
yeah,
talk about that.
right. And that would apply to any program that pays a fixed schedule of hours,
Right,
either for appointments or for drop in,
right.
which a lot of programs do.
Mhm,
You have moved to a pay when you get booked model,
mhm.
right? Which is really good for efficiency.
So
Yeah, we actually bring that up a lot to folks. Like, oh, you could do this, and you don't. It's a big change, obviously, and your tutors have to be on board. But
yeah, your tutors
could you just
don't have to
quickly
be on
talk on that?
board.
What'd you say?
I said your tutors don't have to be on board. You'll get
Well, there you go. So could you speak?
them.
Yeah, speak to that. How did that transition go? Yeah,
So for us, I mean, it was like a hard year. It was a hard year for returning students who had been paid to study or who had been paid to hang out with their tutor friends or whatever, and who had also been paid to like do a lot of really great work. So, but then when we moved to the pay, as your booked model, um, there were some hard feelings and like, oh, well, I don't know how this is going to go and I don't really like this and whatever. And I'm like, okay, I understand. But then when you presented it to them, like we truly presented it, and I said, hey, listen, like we are looking at efficiency, and this is what your efficiency was and is, and if you want to drive that up, then let's do that together. And then they were more invested in that like marketing piece of it, right? And they were out there like hustling, trying to find
Yeah.
folks who were going to
Oh,
fill
that's amazing.
tutoring hours, and as opposed to just like, oh, well, if someone comes, then great, because that wasn't how they were going to get paid anymore. But we also found that it offered a lot more flexibility for our students, even who they didn't want to work 10 hours. They wanted to work 2 or 3, and that was enough for our students. And you kind of have two ends of the spectrum, right? So my students who want to work 2 or 3 hours are my like pre med, they're my pre professional, pre law, whatever, and they are in research, and they've got another volunteer thing that they're working on, and they're studying for the MCAT, and then tutoring is just like one thing that they do, right?
Yeah, right.
But then I also have students who all they do is tutoring, like that's their hustle.
That's their gig.
Exactly. And maybe I have students too who like they depend on those dollars, right?
Yeah.
And for those students, we work with them to bring up their efficiency, to like get them more hours and to
Yeah.
find more opportunities for them to dig into learning support. Maybe they're academic success coaches now. So anyway, it was a hard
The
year.
incentives are very aligned at that point where you're all working together to get more students served. Like that's the
Exactly.
key.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
And
they'll
so it
get
was
paid more.
just like getting them invested and like knowing the rationale. And once they knew the rationale, there was no arguing. Like
No.
you can have feelings about it, but you can't argue with the data.
Yeah, there you go. Well, and yeah, and it'll make better use of the resources going towards tutoring, and it'll serve more students in total, and there'll be more students doing better, and that's why we're all here, right? And so it's quite clear, like if there's dollars being spent as a program and it's just not serving students, like we need to find a way to make that actually always be serving students, and this is the method to do that.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Nice, good one. Cool. Okay, that makes sense. Something else on this topic. Just curious if you like the idea or if you think about it this way at all. But most programs want to grow engagement, and it's hard to debug or like figure out where students might be falling off in the flow. And so, kind of a thought we've had is, there's a funnel. This is like your business stuff. There's the getting students aware of your services at all,
Mhm.
having them try their first session, pretty much, which there's some friction there that hopefully Penji has helped on, but that's sort of the scheduling side, and like making it really easy to get your first session booked. Are there hours available for the course you wanted is a question mark. Sometimes there's not, and that's what those unavailability reports are. And then it's like once you've had your first session, it's like, do they come back for more? And are they like a happy advocate of the LSS? And maybe they even tell their friends. And so sort of like being able to measure those steps and figure out like where are you doing well and not well. And so kind of like the metrics that we were talking about is what percentage of the campus has like signed into Penji at least once? What percentage of people who signed in have gotten a session? How many of those course unavailability requests come in per user or per unit,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh, you have a high percentage relative to the Penji average of this. You maybe have some schedule issues. You have demand is not matching supply, maybe.
Yeah.
And then like the retention of the students. So you have a high number of sessions per student. That's good. Your tutors must be doing a great job in all of this. You can maybe look at it per tutor as well. It's like, oh, this tutor has a lot of people. So anyways, are any of those metrics ones that you look at already? Any of them jump out as particularly helpful? And yeah.
Yeah, so I know Tab in particular in our writing center looks at return students
Yeah.
and looks at time in session. And so something that she found last year was that students um, were staying longer, and we felt like that was speaking anecdotally to quality,
Right.
that they felt like it was worth their time, and that's why they were staying. Um, but she was looking at returners in particular.
Cool.
That's not something that we're looking at right now with learning
Hmm.
support, but I do like the idea of all of what you said, to
All
see
that. Yeah.
where we could pinpoint maybe some issues that we were having,
Yeah.
especially if that were all in like a report that was handed to us.
Yeah.
But we do really love the piece where students send the availability request. All of those come to me, and I pass them on to a GA. But I really like that part of Penji, because before we had it, students might send an email if they took the initiative to do that. But
Yeah.
if it wasn't on our schedule, then it just wasn't on our schedule, and they didn't have a clear path to get
Tell
support
you.
that didn't already exist.
Yeah.
And that's something that we do track throughout the semester, where we're responding to them immediately.
Yeah.
Even if we don't have a support for them, then we are wrapping them back into office hours with their faculty members. So we include their faculty member on an email, to say, like, oh, hey, this person reached out for support. Hey, have you taken advantage of office hours? Do you know what office hours are? And
Yeah.
do you know how to use them
All
well?
right.
And then once we like kind of go back and forth about that a little bit, then if they're still not served, then we work toward actually hiring a tutor for whatever support that they requested. But we
Yeah.
also track that cumulatively throughout the semester and the academic year, to see if there is one course that was requested multiple times that we
Yeah.
need to think about putting on our schedule permanently for the next
Yeah.
semester.
And you have the import setup where you have all the courses at a state
Yeah,
imported, so students can request literally for anything,
literally anything.
and you probably get a lot. And so, great. Okay, cool. And that'll help you craft your schedule for next term.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. Very good. So another topic is AI, everyone's favorite topic.
Sure.
Um, do you know if students are, using it, chat GPT, hey, like, I don't know how to do this integral, and like, help me do the integral, and or whatever. And what's your knowledge of how students are using it right now? Are your tutors bringing it into a session ever because it's helpful? What's the current state for that you're aware of? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let me talk. I've got like two separate pieces to talk about. So, in my FYE role, we introduced some like healthy ways to use AI. And so we did some classroom visits throughout the last academic year, specifically on ChatGPT, but on, what is academic misconduct, what is not, right? Like, what's an appropriate
Mm,
use of AI. And every time that I went into a classroom, usually of like 30 to 40 students, maybe one or two had used it, right?
really?
It shocked me. I was like, what
Th-
are we
this
talking? Because
fall?
the way that our administrators talk about, the way our faculty talk about it, it's like everyone's using it all the time, you know?
Really?
Yes. And and out of every classroom visit I did, it would be like one or two students who'd be like, oh yeah, I use that, or oh, I've used it before. But the majority of them, like 90% or more, had never used it. So I mind blown. But then for our tutors, so that's my student, that's very
Yeah.
anecdotal. I don't have hard data on that,
No, that's helpful. Yeah,
it
don't worry
surprised
about
me.
it. Yeah.
And then, but on the tutor side, in our CRLA training this last academic year,
Yeah.
we actually had an entire session on using ChatGPT in tutoring. And
Okay.
we had this entire matrix of uses, and we had them work through some different activities to develop kind of their own personal use of it, and like how they might use it well as a tutor, what it looks like to use as a study buddy, or to ask questions, or to create our biggest thing, I think their biggest use for it in tutoring was to create an assessment. So, we've talked about that qualitative piece that we have embedded. And at the end, a tutor is supposed to assess the learning of the student that they were with, right? So, like, how do you know they learned? Is it flipped
Yeah.
classroom where they're working through a problem for you? You know, is it that they're just like re explaining a concept? And so, for some of them, they're not super comfortable creating an assessment. Like, they don't want to make a mini quiz or something that they
Got
give
it.
to a student at the end of a session, right?
Yeah.
But we talked about, okay, how could you use ChatGPT to come up with, you know, a question or a set of questions that you and the student could then like work through together at
Cool.
the end of a
Yeah.
session, right? So that was kind of cool. And then to help our tutors understand how to help a student know how they could use it appropriately as a study tool. So we really talked about it more as a study tool and not as like a getting to the answers tool. We really harped on where that line really quickly jumps into academic misconduct.
Yeah. Right. And it does, and it's like, okay, I just need answers for my homework, but it's quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can like prompt it to. I was just like playing around with. You can like feed it a syllabus or feed it like, hey, this is what I'm working on right
Yeah.
now in calculus,
Mm-hmm.
and like use active learning and help me just teach me this stuff. Can you like be?
Absolutely.
And it like, okay, let's start with antiderivatives. Tell me what you think an antiderivative is, and it's like,
Yep.
oh no, that wasn't quite right, and like here's what it is. And
Yep.
then you can be like, be kind of aggressive about making sure I get it before you let me move on. And it's like, all right, tell me again, like try focusing on this. And it's quite good in that way, right? And so there's usefulness to it in the teaching tool for sure.
Oh, I mean, I absolutely agree. I was using SPSS last semester for the first time. I have never used SPSS before.
What's that? Sorry.
IBM SPSS. It's like
Okay.
it's a quantitative analysis tool, and it looks really similar in its setup to like Excel, but
Okay.
it runs a lot of data pieces for you so that you can do quantitative assessment um,
Yeah.
with different data
Cool.
sets. So,
Okay.
but I had never used it before. And I, you know, I'm like on the Google, just like on the Google train, trying to figure out, okay, like step by step how to do this.
Yeah.
And there's like tutorials here and tutorials there in the YouTube, and you're like, oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
I threw it into ChatGPT. I said, give me
Help
explicit,
me.
right, directions
Yeah.
on how to do this function. And it was like, has your data been set up this way? Like, have you done, you know,
Right.
your pre-tests for t-tests and
I'm like,
all this?
no.
And I'm like, explain it all.
Yeah.
And
And it
I
does.
mean, it was so helpful. It was so
Yeah.
helpful to work through in that
Yeah.
way. But
It's super interesting. Yeah. So looking ahead a little bit, like I am really, I was surprised to hear you say that, the infrequency, because I think everybody assumes like if I know about this technology, students know about it 10 times more because
right.
they're,
And
young.
they don't.
Um,
They
and
don't.
they, at least in this case, they don't. And so we'll be kind of monitoring that. But uh, is that, as a learning center director, if students start to be like, whoa, this is a 24/7 really good tutor, like maybe concerning at all that they're just gonna, this is better than, I don't want to go through the work of meeting with another human being, right? Anyway, we're trying to think of ways like how can this be helpful in advancing the learning center mission and amplifying the tutor to where like it's the best of both worlds when you have the tutor plus the AI, and it's like built into the experience that it's that way. And like one idea might be optionally the sessions could be recorded, and then the student could look back on the recording with the tutor at any time. So that's the why it's recorded, but also then like it could be, if there's like an embedded AI in Penji assistant, is then you like look back on the session and be like, follow up with the AI, and like it watched your session, it knows what the tutor taught you, and so it has the context of where you're at.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of an idea, but
Yeah.
yeah, any thoughts in general? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think especially like we talked about that assessment piece, right? So what if your tutor finished the session, like you've just gone through some like chem concepts with me, we're done, and now the like AI has watched that and knows where I'm at in chemistry and what I could improve on, what I struggled with throughout that session, and then it creates like a small quiz for me or a small like homework
Assessment.
assessment, yeah, that I do on my own to like better learn those concepts that I continue to struggle with throughout our session.
Right.
Like, why
Right.
not?
No. Yeah. And then I would know this is my follow up work from the session. The tutor didn't have to do any work. It's probably great questions. And maybe if you can't figure the questions out, it's not like I have to wait for my next session, but you can like be like, I don't know, I forget what, and then the AI can just like help you through it.
I keep
That would be
missing this
cool.
piece, or I keep, struggling with, right, like
Right.
whatever this next step is, and yeah.
Super interesting.
But I also think that humans are social, right? So like I think we like
Not
all
worried that that's going to go
it.
away.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
don't think I have no fears of like one-on-one tutoring just like disappearing, you know.
Yeah.
I think that as long as we understand the tools and know how to use them as appropriate supplements, then we should do that.
Then it's all good. And that would be better. And if it's actually helpful to the student
Yep,
and it's a useful tool, then that's great. And let's just like use that tool as well as possible.
for sure.
Nice. Um, okay. Well, thank you. Helpful topics. This was great.